Today I'm going to share with you 6 strategies about how to communicate as an introverted engineer to become more visible and get promoted. Hi, I'm Yulia Eskin, a Silicon Valley tech lead and career coach. This is the right channel for you if you're a software engineer who wants to get promoted, become a tech lead, or just be a better engineer. So the topic of visibility and communication is super important to your career because visibility is what allows you to stand out, to get noticed by your management, to get more responsibility, more interesting work, and be perceived as an engaged worker and an expert in your field, in your team, and in your company. I talk a lot more about what visibility is, why it's important, and the common fears and misconception in this video that I'll link above. So I want to share with you 6 communication strategies that will help you speak up where you're in a team meeting, how to ask questions, how to talk about your work, and it can be either in a team meeting or in a one-on-one setting. So first of all, active listening through your body language. And what that really means is that before you even say anything, people say that 90% of communication is nonverbal. That really means that you have this ability to communicate to others that you are listening, that you are taking in what they're saying, and you do that by nodding. If somebody is presenting and you can nod, you can show some emotion on your face, some recognition and validation of what they're saying. So a smile, surprise, following them with your eyes, looking at the text. All of these are body language signs that you are engaged and you are paying attention to what is being said. And the reason that's really important is because that establishes trust with the people that are explaining information to you, either if it's in a one-on-one setting or especially in a group environment where someone is presenting their work. And you probably know there's nothing worse about presenting your work and then feeling like nobody looks at you, nobody is paying attention, nobody is then asking anything. Don't multitask in those meetings. Meetings are really best when people pay attention. When people stop paying attention is when the meetings become redundant and boring and people don't feel that there's value to it. So do your work another time, don't be on your laptop, try to really give your full attention, and you'll find that even by simply listening, you are already going to be gathering information and building your expertise. The next level is about speaking out. But before you even speak up, think about all of these things that you can do so that you can build your confidence to eventually speak up. The second thing is asking questions. This is one of the best tools for speaking up, for being visible, especially if you're in a team meeting or even a bigger department meeting. Asking questions allows you to stand out even before you're an expert on anything. By asking questions is how you become an expert, but it's also how you show interest. So as somebody shares their work, try to think about questions that help you understand the reasoning behind the work, the why. That's a really good question to ask, especially from higher level leaders, because the motivation is the thing that people often want to talk about as they present new topics and new projects. Also think about asking questions around what you know and how it relates to what the other person presents. So that can be some relationship between the two projects being discussed or the two problems being discussed. Try to think about the information that you already know about design patterns, about projects you've worked on, approaches to technical problems, and relate that to what is being described. The questions don't need to be complicated. It's often simple questions that provide that aha moment for somebody in the room. It provides an ability for somebody to connect the dots. And if you ask that question, it's very likely that somebody else is wondering about that in the audience as well. At the same time, it can help an expert shift their perspective even slightly about what they're discussing because you're covering a dimension they haven't thought about yet. And so that is how asking questions can lead to innovation and can give you the credit for being the person who asked that. Of course, as you ask questions, other people around you notice that you're being engaged, that you care about what's being discussed, and that shows a lot of visibility to other people in the room, and they can be leaders and they can be managers from other teams, and that is how you start standing out and building essentially your personal brand in the company. And I want to share with you a quick story about how asking questions helped me so much in my career. When I was just starting out, I wasn't an expert yet on web development, but as I was given problems to solve and product requirements, by asking questions, I was able to uncover gaps in requirements. I was able to help product managers to think deeper about the product and create new scenarios that they haven't thought about before. And it also helped me start seeing places where there was misalignment between different technical implementations. And all of that really contributed to me learning more and becoming an expert over time, but also showing to the people I'm working with that I'm reliable and that I'm trustworthy. The third thing you can do is share ideas and brainstorm out loud. I think especially for software engineers, this is such an amazing tool because we're used to brainstorming when we're interviewing, when we are solving problems with other people. And I think if you really start thinking about sharing ideas as brainstorming and not presenting a perfect idea that's fully formed, you're giving yourself the permission to be wrong. And being wrong is totally fine. And I already have covered that in the previous video. But as you are brainstorming and sharing your idea, think about how you share your idea. This is where you need to be able to explain to people what part of the problem you're solving. I think this is where most engineers get a little tied down in the details, because before you dive into the nitty-gritty, have a good sense of in the problem that's being discussed right now, which side of it are you solving? Which component are you talking about? Which sub area or subtask? Start with that and then explain the why. What is the reasoning for this idea? What triggered it for you? A lot of times, if you don't explain the why, people have a hard time understanding why you thought about it, because there's probably an assumption you're making that is not obvious to them. And that is maybe a gap you've noticed that is not obvious to them. So really starting to talk about which part of the problem you're solving, what triggered that idea, which area now you are actually addressing. And one of the important things is really think about tailoring your technical explanation. If you're talking to people who don't have that technical background, try to be more abstract, try to not get to the nitty-gritty, try to think about the purpose of what you're suggesting rather than the how. If you're talking to a more technical audience, to other software engineers, by all means go into the details. But the most important thing, just remember that this is a place to brainstorm, and that brainstorming is the thing that leads to innovation. And as you propose one idea, somebody else on your team will be triggered and think of another idea. And that is how you push, the field forward and kind of pass the ball between everybody who's involved in solving the problem. The fourth thing is using whiteboards. I think that is such a good tool that I absolutely love as a software engineer. As you start digging into a problem and starting to think about all the different components and relationships between the different data models and requirements and all of that, and you're starting to think through the system of what's going to be built. It's really hard to keep all of that in your mind, and especially if you're in a group environment, for everybody to have exactly the same, visual, so to speak, and make sure that they're all thinking about the same things. A great tool for that is whiteboards. Draw what you're thinking, grab a marker, go to the whiteboard and just draw the different pieces, just like a simple diagram, and invite others. And I think that is how you really facilitate brainstorming. So that is already a credit to you that you are facilitating this discussion by making it concrete and allowing other people to come and contribute their ideas. Start by drawing out the problem and the system that's being discussed, and then give it some names, put arrows into their relationships. If you're thinking in terms of relational, think about one-on-one, one-to-many, how are these data models relate to each other, and then from that start digging into the sub-problems that sort of relate the bigger problem you're solving. That is one of the best ways to facilitate brainstorming and solutioning together with other people, and then they will come over and they'll start digging into these parts too. Now, one of the great things you can do is at the end take a picture of what you drew. You're probably gonna have a big board with arrows and writing and ideas and all of that. Take a picture and put that on some kind of knowledge base you have internally. Not only it's evidence of the work you've done and your team has done, but it also gives you legitimacy that your name is on it. The more internal documents you have that are associated with your name, the more evidence there is of the work you've done. So think about it. It's not only the lines of code you've written, but it's also the documentation you've created and those documents of ideas and brainstorming and solutions that you're proposing. The fifth thing is sharing the work that you're doing or already have have done, either in team meetings and with your managers one-on-one. Now, that is really important, and it's different than sharing ideas, because the work that you're already doing or have done, that is where you really show to people the value of your work and the impact of your work. And this is a part of working in tech that you really cannot pass. If you don't talk about your work, no one will do it for you. And when it comes time to performance reviews and to promotions, if over time it hasn't been clear the work you've been doing and its importance, it will be harder to explain that to your manager of the nuances of the work you've done 6 months ago. So if you do this continually, it will become a lot more easier for people to understand your value and the value of your work, essentially. So as you're talking about your work, first of all, realize it's not only about the lines of code you've written. It's not only about the final solution you came to. It's all those nuances and things you've uncovered on the way of solving these problems that are sort of like hidden from the public eye. Think about, as you were thinking of how to solve this problem, what are some of the research and exploration you've done? What are some approaches you tried and didn't work? That's really valuable to share with your teammates, because it makes it so that it doesn't overlap with something they might try, right? Even a failed approach is already really good data for a team. So think about sharing nuances you discovered, gaps you discovered through working on that problem, and that might be gaps in requirements, that might be gaps in the code, that might be a realization that something bigger in the code is broken systematically. So it's really not only about the problem you're working to solve, but all like the context around it that you want to make sure you tell the team about. That matters not only for building visibility, but also because if you've been working on something for 5 days and they only see a submission of 10 lines of code, people may think like, what took you 10 days? But probably what took you 10 days is all the other things you've done to build the right thing, to write the correct 10 lines of code. It's important to do that explanation so that people really understand that you're diligent, that you're trustworthy, that you're reliable, and that the work you do is quality work. And especially as you talk to your manager in your manager one-on-one, make sure that you really give them a clear idea of the goal of the work, especially if your manager is not somebody who works with you directly in the technical sense. Make sure that you really talk about the goal of the work, the reasoning for it, what problem it's solving and for whom. Use the work that you've done in the approach, but don't get too much into the nitty-gritty, and talk more about the impact and what this work can facilitate for your team and for other projects. That is something that your manager really wants to see, is your ability to tie your work to the bigger vision of your team. And the last point I want to make is adopting the mindset as if you're the CEO. What does this really mean? It means that as you find problems, as you see gaps, you think of them as a problem solver. That is really what helps you start standing out and build yourself as a leader among the people you're at. It's not only noticing the problems and reporting them, which is already a great contribution, but it's really thinking about it like, what if I was the one in charge? How would I go about it? As you see problems, that can be problems and processes around the team, that can be technical issues, that can be culture issues, that can be communication issues. Start thinking of a team almost as a machine, as a system. A team is really just a human system. Use that system thinking, use that problem solving you already do for technical issues, and think of it from that perspective. What could be better? What could be improved? And that is where you use those ideas and those thoughts when you have team meetings where you have Scrum retrospectives or postmortems. That's where you start bringing those ideas about how to improve the team at a higher level. Remember to start small. Remember to just take one step at a time, and remember that action is better than no action. Start with the body language. That is one of the best places to start. Making eye contact with the people presenting, using your body language, leaning in to show that you're listening. Then start thinking of where can you ask a good question, where can you share an idea, and so forth. And use this video as a guideline. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe, and visit my website www.yuliaeskin.com. See you in the next video.